Hi, I'm Tony Clark with NIghtwing Healing Arts, and I'm here with Chris Foote of IEB Health and Wellness, and we're going to be talking about type 2 diabetes and some of the things around managing that for the betterment of our own health. Chris, if you could say a few things about what it is that you do and the focus of your business, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm first and foremost an RN with a bachelor's in nursing. And then in the process of that, I realized that degree didn't totally encompass everything that I wanted to accomplish as a healthcare provider.
Okay.
And started thinking about what that would look like. And it kind of led me into health and wellness coaching. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about starting a business, which pretty quickly snowballed into starting a business. Mm-hmm. And got it all up and rolling, and then realized I didn't have any kind of certification in health and wellness coaching or even knew what that meant. So that was the next step. And so I became a health and wellness coach, a certified health and wellness coach. And now I'm in the process of going for my licensure, my national licensure in health and wellness coaching.
Exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the blocks that you experienced as an RN working in the medical industry that you don't have in your present field?
Yeah, so one of the things that my business focuses on is the stuff that the medical field as a whole, this is a very generalized statement, but as a whole, the medical field doesn't focus on the root causes of conditions like diabetes, for example. They only focus on throwing medications at it to make sure that they're meeting their quotas of keeping your blood sugar and your A1C, which is a longer-term measurement of blood sugar, down. Mm-hmm. So IEB, Health and Wellness, focuses more on helping you figure out how to manage your condition to the point where someday maybe you could get off medications, or at least minimize the amount of medications that you take through figuring out what is actually preventing you from reaching those goals. So it's very goal-oriented and it's very individualized. So
yeah, it's probably healthcare should be from the beginning anyway, instead of this generalized one-size-fits-all method for trying to treat all diseases, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what do you think would be like a generalized root cause? I know we just talked about how the generalizations are bad, but sort of like a generalized root cause that anybody could adhere to manage their type 2 diabetes.
Sure. So management of diabetes is both complex and very simple. Diabetes generally is caused, type 2 diabetes specifically, because diabetes type 1 is a completely different beast. Mm-hmm. So just want to make sure that that's clear. But type 2 diabetes generally comes from not exercising and not eating the right type of foods. More so the right type of foods than exercising, but exercising definitely, or physical activity, I should say, plays a part in it. Because just because you're not exercising doesn't necessarily mean that you're not getting enough physical activity. Mm-hmm. Eating a lot of fatty foods, foods that are high in sugar, foods that are high in cholesterol, foods essentially that if you eat a lot of them, they're going to make you gain weight.
So basically the entire American diet.
Yeah, exactly.
So are there some generalized rule of thumb things that people could do in terms of what they're eating and how they're exercising to prevent the onset of type 2 diabetes or to help reverse the process of it?
Sure. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, as I kind of said before. But because everybody's metabolism is different, everybody's body is different, everybody's immune system is different, and your immune system does play a part in your diabetes.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep. And actually, a lot of research is now showing that people with type 2 diabetes, depending on how progressed it is, actually have lower immune systems, who have more they're at a higher risk for infection and disease and other diseases, and so are actually quote unquote immunocompromised. So anyway, but to answer your question, one of the biggest things that people can do is eating more whole grains, fruits and veggies, and less processed foods. A lot of things kind of work together when it comes to diabetes. So your blood sugar or the amount of sugar that you eat works with the sodium, that works with the cholesterol. And so all of these things kind of compound within your blood and within your body to make things worse rather than, better.
So there's like a generalized balance between different nutrients and minerals and vitamins and whatnot that are in the food that is actually needed by your body, and you have to maintain some sort of a balance between all of these different parameters. So how is somebody going to figure that out? Because it sounds like a very complicated process.
So it is, but it also isn't. So, a lot of people don't have the information because it's not something that's generally taught in schools, unless you go to school to become a nutritionist or a dietitian. It's a lot of it is as simple as reading food labels. So food labels tell you what a normal serving size is, and based on the 2,000 calorie diet, what percentage of what's in the food that you're buying, if it does have a food label, how much of that is one serving size, how much sodium, for example, is in that food based on a 2,000 calorie diet and what the percentage of that it is. So, for example, the recommended by food daily allowance of sodium is less than 2,300 milligrams per day. But there are processed foods, there are packaged foods that have about 20 to 40% of that amount in one serving of food.
Wow.
Which is pretty insane if you think about it. Like, why are these things allowed on the shelf? Well, they're allowed on the shelf because they're telling you that it's in there. So it's your choice whether or not you're eating it. Same thing with cholesterol, aka trans fat, aka saturated fat. So the amount of saturated fat that's in certain foods is, it's always on the label, at least usually, if it has any significant amount of saturated or trans fat slash cholesterol. Excuse me. And it tells you right on the label what the percentage of it is in that food.
And it's like based on a certain amount of that food, so like people will eat an entire bag of chips in one sitting, right? And then they're eating like 7.5 times whatever all those recommended variants are there, and we don't think about that. Like, we're not thinking about the fact that, like, oh, well, this is actually only like 9 chips that this fits within. So so those numbers are skewed, and I think it makes it confusing and really easy to not buy into it, because I know, like, through managing my own caloric intake and things like that, and reading labels, like, I encountered that, where I was like actually weighing out how much like 120 calories worth of potato chips is or whatever, and it was like 4 or 5 chips, and I'm like, this is why I have a weight problem, like, this is why my health is bad, because I'm just like mindlessly consuming at least half the bag, right, in one sitting, or whatever. So I think that the FDA is probably like doing us a huge disservice by like, like, it's almost like fooling you into thinking like it's okay to eat these things. Here's the information, but the information is skewed to the point where it's confusing enough for people to not actually have any idea what they're putting into their bodies.
Right. And the FDA only has so much regulation as well. So they're, not to knock the FDA, but there are certain food companies that, get away with not exactly labeling 100% honestly what's in the food. So, and
there's nobody like qualifying that, right? There isn't like an organization that's like, well, this doesn't have 230,000 grams of sodium in it, right?
Right, exactly. Okay. So, but in general, if you're reading food labels, the biggest thing to look at are the amount of sodium in it, the amount of saturated fat, or trans fat or cholesterol that's in it. Total sugars versus added sugars, because a lot of the time it'll have both listed, and added sugars is always part of total sugars. So if something has added sugars in it, it means that essentially those are sugars that don't naturally occur in that food. It means that, basically processed sugar is put into that, whatever that is. Okay. And then the last and probably one of the most important things to look at are the ingredients. So a lot of people don't know that the ingredients are listed in most to least. So if the first thing that's listed is high fructose corn syrup, then that is what there is most of in that food. And then the last thing is always the least amount of whatever's in that food. So if the last thing is, let's say, blue number 5, then, that means that by mass, blue number 5 is the least amount of whatever's in that food. And then when it comes to ingredients, just knowing what the ingredients are is really important, I feel like. So if you can pronounce them and spell them,
it's probably actually a food.
It's probably actually a food. If in general you don't know what it is, like if maybe you can pronounce it and maybe you can spell it, but you have no idea what it is.
Like maltodextrin, what is that?
Right, exactly. Then is that something that you want to put into your body? Because chances are, if you don't know what it is, then your body probably doesn't know what it is and doesn't know what to do with it.
That is a really good rule of thumb, actually. I think that's a really wise observation. And then I know in the past, like I've experienced certain things that they put in foods, or that they put too much in foods, like MSG, they'll tend to still continue to put it in foods, but disguised as something else, like carrageenan is one of those things that it's actually just MSG, but they've managed to like combine it with other things and then repackage it so that people don't know that they're still eating an insane amount of MSG in a lot of these foods. And they're just like, oh, well, I don't know what that is, but I know it's not MSG, so it must be okay.
Right.
So what about, can you say more about like certain things like MSG that are disguised and still put into food that we don't think we're eating?
Sure. So, there are a ton of examples like that. So the biggest thing that I would encourage people to do is if you're not sure what something is, if you don't know exactly what an ingredient is, then research it, look it up. That's what the internet is for.
Right.
Obviously, there are going to be some websites out there that are not completely reliable. So you kind of have to do a little bit more digging until you find which websites you feel like are reliable and give you reliable information.
How could you direct somebody in that, to teach them how to find reliable information? Are there like particular websites that you would go to or resources you would use that you know to trust?
Yeah, so actually I was just going to mention one of them that I have found very reliable is healthline.com. Now, in general, .com websites are kind of a toss-up. Some of them are going to be really good and reliable, and some of them are not. But healthline.com actually, in my experience, has been a very reliable resource. .org websites are also, because they are nonprofit organizations, generally they are going to be reliable because they're not getting anything out of you visiting their website. Let's see, .gov websites, some people are going to say, well, you can't really trust the government. In a lot of things, yes, but there are certain government websites that are actually regulated really well, and when it comes to nutrition and health, .gov websites tend to be more reliable than other websites. And then the last one is .edu websites. So educational institutions, when it comes to health, again, they don't get anything out of you visiting their websites. So they tend to be very reliable when it comes to health and nutritional information.
They're actually looking for data and information,
Exactly.
and not trying to promote or sell any particular angle.
Right.
So we did mention sugars a little bit earlier, but I just want to get some of your input on this. So I think we all have been informed that, all starches, all sugars are the same thing to your body. Your body interprets them and uses them all the same way. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's actually a really, really interesting point. I'm glad that you brought it up. So not all sugars are created equal. So there are two types of sugars. There's complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is just another term for sugars. It's the way that it's what your body breaks down carbohydrates into is sugar. So there's complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. Now, complex carbohydrates, again, are not all created equal, because as we all know, there's very refined, like white rice. White rice is a complex carbohydrate, but it's not exactly, I would say, good for you. It's not totally unhealthy for you, but it's not exactly good for you, because it's refined, and anything that is refined, when you put it into your body has a hard time recognizing it or breaking it down very easily, and you're more likely to store things when your body doesn't know how to break it down. And usually it gets stored as fat. And the same thing goes with any other complex carbohydrate that's refined. So white bread and white pasta. And so when you look at complex carbohydrates, you tend to want to go towards whole grains and starchy vegetables. And when I say starchy vegetables, I'm talking about not canned vegetables. I'm talking about fresh or frozen vegetables. Canned vegetables tend to have a lot of sodium in them, and also less nutrition, because the sodium and the fluid that the canned vegetables sit in just basically pulls all the nutrients out of it. So that's complex carbohydrates in a nutshell. When it comes to simple carbohydrates, fruits are a good example of a good example of simple carbohydrates, because they tend to be, yes, a little bit higher in sugar, but they also have the fiber that your body needs and craves, right? And it's very easy for your body to break down fruits, okay? So fresh fruits or frozen fruits. Again, canned fruits, it's the same thing, except for it's a different type of liquid, and that's pulling all the nutrients out. It's not sodium, it's, sugar.
Right. I was just going to say it's like a syrup more than anything else. So, and that's all artificially made too, right? So that has sugar input into it, which is being also absorbed by the fruit that's in the can.
You got it. So even though you're getting the fiber from those canned fruits, you're also getting extra sugar on top of what you already are supposed to get from the fruit
that
itself.
Your body doesn't know is going to be in that fruit and doesn't know what to do with it.
Exactly.
Right.
And then, obviously there's the refined sugars like candy and sweets and things like that you can always buy as well, that, again, they are processed, and so your body doesn't know how to break down processed foods as easily. Okay.
Because your body probably doesn't know it's food.
Exactly. Right. So it ends up storing it as fat. Now, just one more quick thing about simple versus complex carbohydrates. So when you're diabetic, specifically, your body doesn't break down sugar or doesn't process sugar the way that it's supposed to. That's what makes you a diabetic. And complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates play a really big part in that, because, people always question, I don't understand why my blood sugar is going up and down and all over the place. And a lot of the time it's because people are getting the wrong types of carbohydrates, and are not really paying as close attention to the types of carbohydrates they're getting.
And is that something that's personal to each person, like individual? Yeah. Okay, so
100%.
If there is no one size fits all, like they need to eat, all diabetics need to eat specific types of carbohydrates. So then how does somebody know which ones are good for them?
Right, so any carbohydrate is going to be good for a person, but it's going to depend on when you notice that your blood sugar tends to be higher and when it tends to be lower. And this is why doctors recommend taking your blood sugar before each meal so that you have a better idea. It's not just about to know how much insulin you're supposed to take. It's also to know, it's supposed to help you know what kind of meal you should be eating. So if your blood sugar is really high, then you want to eat a lower carbohydrate meal, but you also want to include some complex carbohydrates. And the reason that I say that is because complex carbohydrates will actually help maintain an even level of sugar over the next course of 3 to 4 hours between that meal and the next meal.
So it's like a slower burning carbohydrate.
Exactly, because it takes longer for your body to process complex carbohydrates because they are complex.
Mm-hmm.
Simple carbohydrates or simple sugars are very easy for your body to process, hence why they're called simple. And so those are going to shoot your blood sugar up really quick, and then you're going to have a crash. That's why your blood sugar, if you eat simple carbohydrates, goes up and down very quickly.
I see. So, and aside from fruit, what are some of those other things that would cause those spikes? Is it just fruit, or are there
No?
things?
I mean, there are a lot of complex or simple carbohydrates out there that can do that. Fruit is just a really good but also healthy example.
It's the best example. So
right.
That would be something that you would eat if you were in a situation where your blood sugar was just crashing and you need a quick up.
Right.
Okay. So, and then also in that category would be candies and other sugars.
Mm-hmm. Orange juice is the most common referred to example, or ginger ale. Ginger ale has a good amount of sugar in it. Not that it's good for you, but it has
if your blood sugar is crashing, it'll help you get it back up. Right.
Yeah, very quickly. But then again, you have to be conscious of that crash. So you want to make sure that right after you have that orange juice or ginger ale or whatever it is, and you get your blood sugar up, you want to have a complex carbohydrate so you don't have that crash.
I was just going to ask that. Thank you for saying that. Okay,
yeah.
So use these things to bring your blood sugar up, and then use a more complex carbohydrate to sustain healthy blood sugar levels, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So you were talking about how white refined rice is bad. Is brown rice equally as bad?
No. So it goes back to that refined piece of it, so white rice is very processed. Brown rice is not so much. So anything that is processed is not going to be as good for our bodies, and the only reason that is one of the only reasons that is because is simply because it's processed. And when something is processed, it means that stuff is either taken out of it or put into it, or both, that our bodies makes it so our bodies don't know what to do with it. Okay. And when our bodies don't know what to do with something, it can't break it down as easily. And so it either excretes it, or more often than not, it stores it. Okay. And our body stores things as fat because it's like saving up for quote unquote winter, like a bear does for hibernation. But a lot of the time we never end up using that because it kind of goes back to not getting enough physical activity in our diet or in our routine. So if we're eating some refined stuff, and we're also getting a good amount of physical activity, then chances are we're probably going to use that refined stuff in one way, shape, or form. But that's not always the case. So
I see. Okay. So I had a follow-up question, and then it just disappeared as soon as I started talking.
That's okay.
I think this is a lot of really great information. So in order for somebody to maintain a healthy diet while being diabetic, do you think that a vegan diet is necessary, or do you think that they can accomplish retaining positive health benefits from a more omnivorous diet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say that on the one hand, yes, I am a little bit biased because I am vegan. And while I really enjoy the diet and I get a lot out of it, but it's still just me. Like, it's my own personal opinion. for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that everybody could benefit from a vegan diet? Absolutely. Do I think it's realistic for everybody? No.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that some people, have health conditions where they could never be on a completely vegan diet. I know that people were brought up a certain way, and converting to a vegan diet is just not something that they could realistically do for themselves. And there's also a lot of conflicting research out there that, saying whether or not a vegan diet is totally healthy or not. So, to answer your question in a simple way, I think that anybody can be perfectly healthy on a non-vegan diet, or on, an omnivorous diet, as you put it, where they're eating both plants and animal products. And there's probably a lot of vegans out there who would probably like to reach through and grab me right now and shake me, but
because they're angry because they're hungry.
Right. It's about balance. It really, truly is mostly, if not completely, about balance. We want to make sure that we are getting a balanced diet, and a balanced diet truly means eating mostly fruits and veggies, okay, because those are where we get most of our nutrients from. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Fruits and vegetables should be at least half of our intake every day. Whole grains and starches should be another part of that. Now, not everybody can eat whole grains, so there are certain grains out there. So, for example, people who are gluten intolerant,
Mm-hmm.
there are grains out there that are totally gluten-free. Quinoa is a great example.
Amaranth.
Yep, those are both whole grains that are gluten-free. There are also higher starch vegetables, so sweet potatoes, beets, carrots, those types of things give you those complex carbohydrates that you would get from those whole grains.
And then also like a lot of different vitamins and nutrients.
Exactly. So that's another piece of it. And then the protein as well is another big piece of it. And people, when people think about protein, they're always thinking about animal products. But what a lot of people don't realize is that actually almost any plant that you eat has protein in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where plant protein comes from.
Right.
But yes, there are certain plants that have more protein in them. So legumes.
I think broccoli is one of them, right?
Yep, broccoli has a lot of protein in it. Peas, beans, lentils, those types of things. Also, quinoa is a complete protein all on its own. When I say complete protein, I mean it has a full full complex of the amino acids that your body needs.
Amazing.
And rice and beans actually together are a complete protein.
I heard that before. Yep.
So those are things that you want to think about as well when you're thinking about a balanced diet.
Mm-hmm.
Is the amount of protein that you're getting in it. And yes, eggs are a healthy protein, but there's also a lot of cholesterol in eggs if you have the yolk still.
Mm-hmm.
If you are eating one egg actually has a total recommended daily value of cholesterol in it.
Wow.
So then you add, breakfast sausage or bacon, and then buttered toast and, milk, and all to your breakfast, and you're getting generally 3 days worth of cholesterol in one meal.
And then we wonder why we have a weight problem.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Sure. And one, while we're on the topic, one statistic that a lot of people are not aware of is that Americans on average tend to eat more than twice the amount of protein that their bodies need and less than half of the amount of fiber that their bodies need.
Okay.
So, and that comes from eating, mostly animal products instead of mostly plant products, and not getting enough of the fruits and veggies and whole grains that our bodies really need. So
I've heard it said that, on a few different nutritionist websites that you should never limit how much fruit and vegetables you're eating. You should literally be eating as much as you can get your hands on, and then like protein should be like a third of whatever that number is, and then the same with like
whole grain
things.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb to follow. Is if you're, and going back to what I said before, if you're eating at least half of everything you eat is fruits and vegetables, then you're already doing pretty well. And you know, if I'm gonna talk to anybody, if they were gonna ask me, well, how much animal? If I'm gonna eat animal, products, how much animal products should I eat in a meal or in a day or whatever? On average, the recommended amount of actual animal products in one meal is about the size of your palm or less. So
it's usually like 4 ounces, I think.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So if you kind of stick to that rule of thumb for every meal, not in a day, but in a meal, the size of your palm or less. So yes, that's a pretty small steak, right? Or, that's generally about 1 egg, or, a piece of chicken, but I'll tell you, if you're eating a piece of chicken or a steak or an egg that size, and then you're eating whole grains that are about a quarter of your plate, and then the right amount of fruits and vegetables, people are like, well, I can't, I'm going to be so hungry after that meal. Actually, you're going to be really, quite satisfied. I can almost guarantee it. Mm-hmm. The other thing that people generally don't get enough of, and this is probably the most important thing, and it's also really important for blood sugar regulation, is water. If I was going to push any one healthy habit for anybody, it doesn't matter if you're a diabetic, you have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, whatever, if there was one good habit, healthy habit that I would push on anybody, is drinking enough water. Now, there are certain people out there with health conditions, just as an aside, that have to limit the amount of water intake that they have. And for those people, please ignore, what I'm saying, and listen to your doctor. But for those of you who don't have a health condition where you have to limit your water intake, I would strongly encourage you to drink at least half of your body weight in ounces of water a day. Mm-hmm. And that's if you're not exercising to the point where you sweat. So as an example, what does that look like? If you weigh 200 pounds, average American male, give or take, right?
Sure.
If you weigh 200 pounds, then on average, you should be drinking about 100 ounces of water, half of your body weight in ounces, right? And then if you're exercising to the point where you sweat, then you want to add another 16 to 32 ounces of water to that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are like, there's no way I'm going to be able to drink that amount of water in a day. But I'll tell you what, if you carry a 32-ounce bottle, just as an example, 32-ounce bottle of water around with you every day, and you fill it up when it gets empty, you'd be surprised at how quickly you go through 100 ounces of water. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I think something that also bears mentioning is just because this is something that I recently learned from my doctor, because I've been struggling with exercising and feeling woozy when I'm exercising, and my doctor actually pointed out to me, well, you have IBS. So therefore, you're over excreting and you're eliminating so much of your body water all the time. You need to also compensate for that. So I should be hitting that 100-ounce mark. Plus I got to throw in another 50 for whatever my body's just purging randomly all the time. Mm-hmm. And then I also sweat a lot when I work out. So I have to also so I need to be drinking almost equal, just based on all of those factors. But I think, having that as a baseline is really good. But people need to take whatever health concerns that they actually have going on in their body, if they have hyperhidrosis or if they have IBS or Crohn's disease or something that's causing them to constantly be depleting their water, diabetes insipidus, where they're constantly urinating, they need to be also compensating for that too. Yes. And then now that you're talking about water too, I think there's more to it than just the water. We also need the electrolyte minerals. We need potassium, we need magnesium, we need zinc and calcium, right? Is
Yeah.
Is that all of them? Or did I
Yeah,
miss some?
and no, that's a really great point. Actually, all of that's really great. Those are really great points. So, if your doctor is telling you, you should be getting more water in your diet because you have this health condition, then absolutely, half of your body weight in ounces of water may not be enough for you. This is a starting point, like a jumping off point when I say half of your body weight in ounces of water.
Considering you have perfect health, this would be where you should be. But should you have other things going on?
Exactly. And then when it comes to nutrients and minerals, like what you're talking about, that's where eating a balanced diet comes into play. And the nice thing is we have technology, we have blood work that can tell us, what are we low in? Well, if we get blood work drawn and we're low in magnesium, then there are certain foods that we can eat more of, or we can always take a multivitamin. And there are a lot of things that ways and tools in our tool belt that can help us figure out, what are we low in, what are we depleted in, and make sure that we're supplementing those things to prevent further complications or other health issues from happening. But yeah, those are really good points that that you made about making sure that we get enough minerals and nutrients into our diet as well. So
I think that this conversation is going great, and I think that there's so many directions that I want to go in right now because you've got so much information and it's so good and it's so valuable. I feel so lucky to have you here for this. But I do want to address the questions that people actually have and then get through that.
Yeah.
So I know some of this is probably going to be redundant information. So if you feel like maybe there's a way you can maybe elaborate further on the questions if they are similar to something you've already said, that would be appreciated. So the first question from a random diabetic person is, how can I manage my food cravings?
That's a very good question, and one that I've heard a lot, actually, doing what I do, because food cravings are a big barrier for people. Generally, when we have food cravings, it's because our body is missing an essential nutrient that we need. So I'm not going to go into all of them, but one of the first things that I will tell you is that sometimes when we have food cravings, it's because we're actually dehydrated. So the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves is make sure that we stay hydrated. And if we start to feel a craving, try drinking some water. If we start to feel hungry for something specific, try drinking some water, because a lot of the time what that will tell us is, are we actually hungry? And if we're actually hungry, then we're still going to be hungry after we drink water. Okay? If we drink water and we have a craving for something specific, usually that craving goes away because we realize pretty quickly that we're not hungry.
So the impulse that most people are picking up on is the body wants something, and we're more prone to say it's food.
Yeah.
Rather than saying that, okay, that it could potentially be water. So it's good to test it by just throwing some water at it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And the other thing is, and I'm going to go back to research, is, if you're craving something sweet, for example, then usually your body is not getting enough, for example, fruits in your diet. Okay,
that's what your body knows to be the sweets.
Exactly. The natural source for sweets. If your body is craving, something salty or savory, then usually it means that you're not getting enough of a certain type of nutrient in your diet. So you always want to go back to, what is my body actually craving? Try drinking some water first and then go from there. And if all else fails, research. Definitely research, because chances are you're gonna find what your body actually needs. Sometimes it's gonna be trial and error, because if you're craving something sweet and that sweet craving doesn't go away by eating a piece of fruit, it might be because you're missing a certain specific nutrient that maybe is found in fruit, but not that piece of fruit that you just ate.
It might be a grapefruit instead of an orange or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Excellent. So the next question is, what does food addiction look like?
So food addiction, yeah, and there is no hard and fast answer for that. And, I hate to say it that way, but it goes back to everybody's different. So food addiction, sometimes it's just because we are dealing with some trauma in our past that food is the way that we deal with that. It's a lot of the time it comes from stress. People stress eat all the time. And it's a comfort thing. And I want to preface this by saying there's nothing bad with finding comfort in food. Finding comfort in food is a totally normal human reaction. But when we use that as a coping mechanism, it can become a food addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we are finding ourselves in with pre-existing health conditions or chronic health conditions that we can't seem to get out of this loop. So food addiction, long story short, is going to look different for everybody. Finding the right coping mechanisms is that's how we get out of those food addictions. Figuring out what's actually going on. What's the real cause of my food addiction? Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it, trauma in my past, PTSD, or is it something else entirely? Because it's not always a mental health thing. Sometimes it's something else entirely.
There could be a metabolic imbalance too.
Right. So digging a little bit deeper is going to be the way to figure that out.
So then, like, the short advice is to not necessarily avoid food addictive tendencies, but to be observant of yourself and the process of you buying into your addictions. If you find yourself drowning your sorrows in ice cream, go ahead and do it, but maybe ask yourself why you're doing that.
Yeah. Be aware of it. Be aware of it and try to, if it's something that you want to get away from, then be aware of it and start digging a little bit deeper.
Beautiful. Love it. Okay. What are alternate healthy choices I can make when I have a desire to eat garbage?
So it kind of goes back to the question that you asked before about cravings and addictions. When you want to eat quote unquote garbage food, that's okay. Eat garbage food once in a while. Allow yourself garbage food, or food that maybe is not as good for you. Allow it for yourself, maybe as a reward. Now, I'm never going to tell someone how they should or shouldn't eat, unless they are specifically telling me, is this food good or bad, or asking me, is this food good or bad? And even then, I'm going to tell them, food in general is neither good or bad. It's what our body does with it that maybe makes it good or bad, right? Or how our body processes it or can't process it that makes it quote unquote good or bad. Food is sustenance regardless, and so when it comes to garbage food, I'm sorry I'm making these answers a little bit longer than maybe they need to be, but
this is great.
Food is not quote unquote garbage, but junk food, or chips or sweets or whatever people may
empty
want.
Calories.
Yeah, people want to label as junk food. Ultimately, if you're going to eat that versus eating nothing and your body truly needs sustenance, then eat, by all means. But if you're eating it as a source of coping, as we just discussed, then again, you may want to dig a little bit deeper. I don't know if this is answering your question.
It is. Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, I want to make sure that people are not being stigmatized and that food is not being stigmatized as quote unquote good or bad, because we want to, I think one of the biggest problems that we have is the fact that we do stigmatize food as good or bad or label it as good or bad. And, food is neither good nor bad. It's, what our body does with it that, makes it quote unquote good or bad. So
it's a great answer. So I've heard somewhere before that there's like this if you're trying to get your diet right, there's this 80-20 rule, like where 80% of the time you're eating clean, you're eating healthy, you're eating whole grains, you're eating fruits, vegetables, clean proteins, animal or non-animal. And then like the other 20% of the time you're like, I want a cheeseburger, you know, or I'm going to go, you know, sit on the couch and eat ice cream or whatever, you know, like just allow yourself that 20%. And I think maybe that's what you're referring to when you say like, you know, like it's about like what you're doing with the food or how you're using the food.
Yes. I think that's a really good rule to follow for people who are trying to get into a healthier frame of mind, or into a healthier body. But you know, there are quote unquote overweight people who are healthy, and there are thin people who are unhealthy. So when I talk about a healthy body, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are thin. There are healthy bodies all across the spectrum, and so I don't want to. I want to make sure that we're staying away from stigmatizing people who are quote unquote overweight, because those BMI numbers that you see a lot at the doctor's office, or if you go for a weight screening at, you know, whether with a fitness instructor or whatever, a BMI is rarely an accurate measurement of your body. It stands for body mass index, but a lot of the time when it says your BMI is over or under, it's just based on your height and weight. It's not actually a good measurement of how healthy you are.
It's not measuring your muscle mass versus your fat mass, or anything like that.
Exactly.
Because I think I was at one point in time like 150 pounds, and like my cholesterol and triglycerides were completely out of control. But I looked like I was, you know, from a concentration camp. I was very, you know, very thin. So yeah, I agree with you. Like thin, like the size of your body does not necessarily correlate with how healthy you are.
Exactly.
So if that's not a good indicator, then what is?
A good indicator is looking at the whole picture. And when I say the whole picture, I'm not just talking about your physical health, you know, so your blood work and your body mass index and, you know, your blood pressure and your triglycerides and your cholesterol and all of that stuff. That's when I say physical health, that's what I'm talking about. And your sleep and, you know, those things have to do with your body and how it functions, right? But there's also mental health. There's also occupational wellness. There's social wellness. There's a whole other dimension, several dimensions actually of wellness.
Almost like there's 8 dimensions of it. Right?
Yes, 8 dimensions of wellness, which we won't go into right now.
That'll be another talk.
That's another entire conversation. Several conversations actually. But there are a lot more dimensions of wellness than people realize, and so it's a balance. A truly healthy or well person it's a balance. It's not just about your physical wellness. So,
but it's all aspects of you as a person being healthy,
right? Or being in the place where you feel whole, where you feel healthy and well.
So thinking about what you're feeling.
Yeah, because it's
not the numbers.
Right, and it's not about other people's perspective of it either. And a lot of the time that's what we're focusing on is, well, what does my doctor think of my health? You know, or what does my psychiatrist think of my mental wellness? You know, what do you think of your mental wellness? You know,
right.
That's where IEB focuses is, what do you think you need to work on? What do you think that are the problem areas in your life? Your
feeling and how you are and how you show up every day is the best barometer for what's actually happening in your body. If you wake up every day feeling like you're dragging it and you can't do anything, that you don't have any energy, something's probably wrong, right?
Right.
But if you can spring out of bed and you can jump to and you can get into whatever it is the day is asking of you, then you're probably in a good place. And that should probably be an indicator of where you're at.
Right. And I just going back to what I was just saying, do doctors and psychiatrists and mental health practitioners, and all of the health practitioners, do they know a lot about what the body is, how it's supposed to function, and how the mind is supposed to function, and everything? Absolutely. But a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them don't take into account how well you know your own body and mind. So I don't want to knock other healthcare practitioners or mental health professionals.
Let's shove.
I don't want to put them down, because they know their stuff. I don't want to make it sound like they don't. But they don't know you as well as you do.
Correct.
So that's kind of where I'm going with it. So.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people need to take home. And that's been my experience with doctors in the past, where I felt like I need to advocate for myself, because this doctor is trying to push some other thing on me that I don't necessarily feel is an issue. So yeah, at the end of the day, we've got to be our own best advocate and use how we feel about ourselves as the guide through these processes of getting healthier. Okay, how can I make choices that are healthy and also satisfying?
Okay. So, one, eat what you want. Okay.
Simple.
Yeah, eat what you want. But also know that what you want a lot of the time may mean that you actually don't want that thing. It may be something else that you want. Going back to cravings, right? So
you're craving sweets and you're eating donuts instead of strawberries.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, it's also knowing what we're eating, right? So when I was talking about food labels, knowing what's in your food, that's the best way to eat a balanced diet. I've working with this one guy who, when we started talking about food labels and he started reading food labels, he's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was eating all of this stuff that was in my food. That all of this stuff, I'm putting all of this stuff that I don't even know what it is into my body all of the time. And when he stopped eating all of that stuff, he started to see significant changes. So a lot of it is just not eating stuff. The fillers that are in food.
Actual food.
Right. And eating actual food goes back to, looking at food labels and, asking yourself, before you eat something, is this just going to fill me or is it going to fuel me?
Okay, and that's how you eat food that is healthy but also satisfies. You have to think about it from the aspect of this isn't just something that I'm gluttonously putting into my body because I enjoy the way it tastes, but I'm feeding my body.
Right, and not just feeding my body, again, fueling my body. Think of your body as a car, right? And not just any car, like your dream car, the car that you want to run forever because you love the way you look in it, and you love the way you feel in it, and you love the way it drives and the way it drives down the road, and you love when it goes fast. Well, okay, that's your body, right? And if you have that dream car, you're going to take perfect, pristine care of it, right? You're going to put nothing but the best fuel in it. You're going to get an oil change, probably more often than it needs to. You're going to wash and wax it, all the time. You're going to take very, very good care of it. That is your body. So making sure that you're putting into it things that are just going to fuel it and make it run better, rather than just, I'll just put whatever into it, I don't need to wash or wax it that much. I don't need to do an oil change all that often, right? It's not that important. Well, is your body your dream car or just some old beater that your parents gave you?
Right. No, that's a great analogy. I love that. Yeah, because it's already got me thinking like how much I have changed my diet and my health journey over the last couple of years, and how I'm focusing more on exactly what you're talking about, where I'm trying to put things into my body that are actually fueling it and not just wanting to taste something or wanting to be full. Right, really is what the initial goal I think for me was. Great stuff. Okay, how can I find a buddy to be accountable to let me know my progress on a regular basis?
So friends are really great for things like that.
But friends can also be our worst enemy.
Friends can also be our worst enemy.
The cake.
Yes.
Yeah,
so one way to do it is to find a friend or family member that has the same vision as you do, not only for yourself but also for themselves. Okay, that is one way to do it. And if you're able to do that, you make an agreement. Even write it down. Between the two of you and say, these are the things that we want to improve on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same agreement, but part of the agreement, if you're going to do that, should be we're going to hold each other accountable for holding to this agreement that we've made, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to find a health practitioner or a health and wellness coach or someone such as myself.
That would actually be a good use for you.
Right. Because that's a lot of what I do, and create goals with that person. And you could do the same thing with your buddy, your friend, or your family member. Create goals. What do those goals look like? And a lot of the time when I talk, actually pretty much all the time when I talk about goals, I talk about what are called SMART goals. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-driven. Okay, so is that goal very specific to you? Is it measurable? Is it something that you can say, well, I was here and now I'm here? Once you've achieved part of that goal, or all of that goal, if that's the case. Is it something that I can achieve in the time-driven, in the time that I've set for myself? Is it something that I can actually achieve, or am I like shooting for the stars here? Mm-hmm. It's okay to shoot for the stars as long as you know that at some point you can achieve that, right? And then realistic. Is it realistic for myself that, I can lose 20 pounds in 3 months? 20 pounds in 3 months is totally realistic for some people, not so much for others.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then going back to the T for time-driven, is it, am I setting this over the course of 3 weeks, or is it, 3 months, or whatever the case may be? So, having those goals and having someone to hold you accountable, those are probably two of the most important pieces when it comes to getting to certain points in your life that you want to when it comes to your health and wellness.
So, right. I love that. This is a great answer so far. How can I stop feeling guilty when I fall off the wagon?
Yeah, that's a struggle for pretty much everybody, including myself.
Because we all do.
Right. Everybody falls off the wagon. So I would encourage everybody to take perfection out of the picture. Okay?
I'd agree.
Stop focusing on perfection and focus on progress. Okay?
Yes.
Because any progress is still progress. And sometimes progress looks like a backward slope a little bit. When we're playing a board game, a lot of the time we have to maybe get sent back 3 spaces before we can move forward 2 spaces. Life sometimes looks that way. It's just the way it is. And that's okay. It doesn't matter because we're still in a forward movement. Generally, we don't get sent back 3 spaces just to get sent back another 3 spaces, just to get sent back another 3 spaces. Right. At some point, we're going to move forward. Okay, so as long as we keep looking forward instead of looking backwards, and we're like, I started back there. If sometimes you want to look backwards and be like, oh yeah, I'm here now, but that's where I started. That's okay, but keep looking forward. You know where you're going. And that's the important thing, is focusing on the progress rather than on perfection.
I love that because I feel like just in mental health awareness too, which I used to work with a lot, we get into it with this idea that like our progress is going to be this beautiful graph and it's this straight line towards health. But it's the same with our physical health too. And I've experienced that, in this health and wellness journey myself, where like it's more like I'm doing real good and then like something sets me back. But then the thing is I pick back up. you know, and then the next time before the next setback, I could get a little bit better, you know, and I think accepting that as part of the journey is probably as crucial as actually just staying in it, you know, like sometimes you're just not going to be able to show up, like something's going to happen, you know, like maybe there's a death in the family, you know, maybe something, you know, like you hurt your leg or you need a surgery and then you're out of being able to work out for 3 months or something, right? Like you have to allow yourself to have those experiences part of the journey, and you got to look at the overall picture, like not just like, oh, you know, like I lost 15 pounds and then I gained 5, you know, like you got to look at, you know, yeah, but I still lost that 10, right? You got to remember that.
And I, you know, one of my clients actually he's written programs. He's a computer nerd, which is super awesome actually, because he brings in graphs every time that we meet of his progress. And, you know, multiple graphs, not just one graph. It's not just his weight, it's his calorie intake and his protein intake and all of these crazy graphs that he loves to create, which is super cool. And his graphs are not single one of them are a straight line.
They sure are.
All of them go up and down and up and down. But, you know, where he started and where he is now that is what we look at. You know, we don't focus on, you know, the dips. We focus on the upward movement.
The continual progress.
Exactly.
Progress, not the perfection.
Exactly.
Right. You're allowed to fuck up.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Fucking up is part of life. So.
It sure is.
And
you don't
it's
get
a
anywhere
normal
without
part of life.
It is.
And sometimes a fun part of life. So, you know, enjoy those parts too.
Oh, I certainly do. What is the best way to eat what I want while maintaining a healthy glucose level?
So we kind of talked about it and touched on it already when we were talking about carbohydrates. So, fiber is going to be really important. So just to kind of...
Fiber and water.
Yep, fiber and water. So water is really, really good for blood sugar regulation. Again, I cannot stress water intake enough for so many reasons. But since we're talking about blood sugar, you know, it really is very important. If you're drinking enough water, you are going to see your blood sugar levels even out. You know, and that will most likely actually be lower if you're eating the exact same stuff as you were before and you just start drinking more water. You're going to see your blood sugar levels come down. And I'll explain why. So, because one, I love explaining. And two, I think sometimes the explanation, when it's clear and simple, it helps people get a better picture and a better understanding, and helps them accomplish their goals a little bit more easily because they understand how things work.
I know it works that way for me specifically.
Absolutely, right? So when we are dehydrated, right, our blood tends to be thicker, right? Because our blood is partially made up of water, right? So if we don't have enough water in our system, it's our blood is just naturally going to be thicker. Well, when our blood is thicker, what happens is the things in our blood are more concentrated, including our blood sugar. So our blood sugar levels are actually going to be higher, okay? So increasing our water intake deconcentrates our blood, or makes it...
Dilutes it.
Right, dilutes it, thins it out a little bit. Not only does it decrease our blood sugar levels and help regulate them more, especially if we are consistently hydrated, but it also brings down our blood pressure, because when our blood is thinner, it's easier for our heart to pump blood through our body. It doesn't have to work as hard, so our blood pressure is going to come down.
So you think that blood pressure is more closely related with hydration levels in the body?
100%, because going back to salt for a second, what does water do when it comes to salt? Water follows salt. Okay, so if we have higher amounts of sodium or salt in our body, water is going to follow the salt. It dehydrates us. So higher salt means higher blood pressure because we're dehydrated. our blood is thinner, it's harder for our heart to pump blood through our body. So our blood pressure goes up when we have higher amounts of sodium. So when I was talking earlier about, blood sugar playing a part in cholesterol and playing a part in sodium, and those three things, those three baddies or, negative things working together, our blood sugar, our cholesterol, our sodium levels, sodium dehydrates us. Cholesterol clogs our arteries and makes it harder for our heart to pump blood through our bodies. And blood sugar in our dehydrated blood is more concentrated. So it is harder for our body to process our blood sugar that way. And so all of these things kind of compound and compound and compound just because we're dehydrated. And so
such a simple fix for all of these problems,
right?
Yeah,
and it's
better hydration,
exactly,
and it's not just more water; it's better hydration.
Yeah. So anyway, and yes, we get water from a lot of different sources, fruits and veggies and things that we eat and drink throughout the day. Coffee actually is a source of water, but it doesn't really dehydrate or hydrate us because it is a diuretic. It does make us pee. So, if we drink coffee and then we drink water, we're actually peeing more than what we took in.
So then that half amount that we came up with, a half ounce theory that we had before, goes up even more, with that. So
exactly.
Is there a correlation there? Like if I have X amount of ounces of coffee, I should have X amount of ounces of water, or is it something that we just feel out?
That's a really good question. As a good rule of thumb, I tend to tell people have 2 cups of water for every 1 cup of coffee.
That's a great ratio.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and same thing for alcohol, because alcohol also depletes not only does it dehydrate us, but it also depletes our electrolytes. So we want to make sure that we're not only drinking water, but replacing those electrolytes when we drink alcohol. So same thing, 2 cups of water for every cup of alcohol is a good rule of thumb to follow. Wow. And it also helps us, I don't want to say stay sober, but it does help decrease the likelihood of a hangover. So
I think that's something that would be attractive for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely would be attractive to me.
I did want to say something that the way that I've been adjusting my diet through my own health journey has been incremental. It hasn't been a crash course from this is how I was eating to now I just only eat carrot sticks and tofu. It's been okay, this thing is not as good for me as maybe some other choices. Let me eliminate that and replace it with something. And it's just been a gradual process of trying to replace the garbage I have been eating with more nutrient dense food. That's my goal, low calorie, nutrient dense food.
Yeah.
And that seems to be effective.
You're touching on a really, really good point. So, when I was talking about goals earlier, part of that is when I was talking about achievable and realistic. So, part of achievable and realistic is setting small goals for ourselves, right?
To do it incrementally.
Exactly. And what you were just talking about. So if we set when I said shooting for the stars, well, going from eating, quote unquote, junk food all the time to not eating any junk food, that's shooting for the stars. If we're trying to do that over the course of, a week to a month, let's say, just as an example. Now, some people are hardcore and can do that. Go for it. If you feel like you're hardcore enough to do that, great. But I'm going to tell you, chances are, if you try to go from eating junk food all the time to not eating any junk food in a short amount of time, then you're going to fail. And then you're going to feel worse about yourself because you failed.
And then you're going to start the cycle of emotional eating.
Exactly.
Right, because almost every time we shove ourselves too hard in one direction, we will rebel against ourselves and we will rebound harder into the thing that we're trying to escape.
Yes, and it's okay to mess up. As I said before,
progress,
focus
not
on
perfection.
Progress, not perfection, right? It's okay to mess up, but we just don't want to mess up all the time. And if we want to avoid messing up, if we want to mess up as little as possible, then the most realistic and achievable way to do that is to take small steps towards our goals. Okay, so instead of eating 2 bags of chips every night, maybe cut it down to 1 bag of chips every night for a week. And then the next week, you cut it down to a half a bag of chips every night for a week. And then a quarter of a bag of chips. And then maybe, a quarter of a bag of chips every other night, And so make it a progression rather than a hard stop. Some people can do cold turkey, but it's not for very many people. Human beings are built where they need small steps. And kind of along that same line of thinking, I will say it's not about getting rid of bad habits. It is about creating new good habits to replace the old ones. Getting rid of bad habits is really, really hard. But if you don't focus on getting rid of the bad habits and instead you focus on creating new good habits, eventually those new good habits are going to replace the bad habits without you even realizing it. Okay?
Yeah.
And again, slow progression, step by step by step.
Yeah, beautiful. What would an ideal meal schedule look like?
So there's no easy answer to that.
There never is.
Yeah, because everybody, again, is different. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's built differently. And I could say, well, ideally you want to eat 3 square meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with like maybe a snack in between each meals and maybe a light, snack before bed, something like that. Do I recommend eating right before bed? No. But if you know that your blood sugar is going to crash overnight, then yeah, you might want to have a good, snack before bed that is going to, like, for example, complex carbohydrates. Small amount of complex carbohydrates for people whose blood sugar crashes overnight is a good idea, right? Because it's going to help bring your blood sugar up and then regulate it over the night, right? So, 3 square meals a day, that's quote unquote ideal for a lot of people. But some people need to eat, a small meal every couple of hours. For some people, that's actually better. It works better for their schedule. If you're able to do that, that's great. Some people are grazers, where they eat consistently throughout the day. It's like a snack every hour. And that's fine. If that works for you and you're getting what you need, your body is getting what it needs, then that's awesome. So there isn't a hard and fast rule to follow. You're going to have to figure that one out yourself. I can't tell you what to do.
So if somebody wanted to start creating their own diet schedule, do you think that there's a baseline that you would recommend to people? Like, try starting out here and see what happens. What would that be?
Yeah, so first of all, listen to your body, because that's going to be really important. Make sure that you're eating when you're actually hungry. And when I say when you're actually hungry, it goes back to if you feel like you're craving something specific, then have some water. The other part of that is, when you're eating a meal, try taking a couple sips of water in between every few bites or so, because a lot of the time what you find, and I found this myself, is that you actually fill up faster, and it helps you realize when you're full faster. Okay. But for actual meal planning, I would say, try to eat something small when you first wake up in the morning, if that's something that you can do. Always recommend drinking a full glass of water when you first wake up in the morning, just to kind of get your metabolism going, okay? Not saying you have to chug an entire glass of water first thing when you get out of bed, but over the course of like the first half an hour or so when you first get out of bed, try drinking a glass of water and seeing how you feel. I can almost guarantee you're going to be hungry after you finish that glass of water, because it does get your metabolism going. Then eat, to the point where you're not hungry, and eat slowly enough so that you, at each meal, so that when you're actually
so
full.
you can actually feel
Right.
the fact that you're full.
Right. So that you don't get to the point where you're overly full. And I have experienced this myself. When I overeat consistently, my stomach stretches. When I eat smaller meals consistently, my stomach shrinks and I'll get full faster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so your body will adjust depending on what works for you, you know? So if you're eating multiple small meals throughout the day, then, you know, a smaller meal eventually is going to satisfy you, you know? And it might only satisfy you for an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then your body will tell you that it's hungry again. So you can make almost any meal plan work for yourself,
mm-hmm.
or meal time frame. But you have to figure out what works for you and how you want to lose weight or gain weight or, you know, put on muscle or whatever the case may be. So
okay.
Hopefully that answers your question.
I think so. I think it gives us the information to help us to build our own diet plan. You know, we can start with like first thing in the morning and just see what works for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think a general rule that I've heard in the past that I feel like is a good starting off point is to make sure you're eating something every 2 hours, because
mm-hmm.
it helps keep that blood sugar level pretty consistent. Like, you know, there will of course be an arc, but you know, like you'll catch it just as it starts to dip if you
mm-hmm.
do that, you know, and you never hopefully will like dip too low. And I think that's when people, diabetic or not, tend to overeat. When their blood sugar
Right.
gets a little too low, the alarm goes off in the brain and the body just wants to throw everything that it can inside the body to bring that blood sugar up. So if you can keep it kind of like right around that range in the middle by eating every couple hours, then it will stop the body from getting into that panic eat response, right?
Yeah.
All right. So how can I best moderate my eating habits?
So there's a couple ways of doing that, and I know that we've talked a lot about moderating eating in general. You gotta do what works for you. You know, trial and error sometimes are the best learners, or make the best lessons.
Teachers,
yeah. So some people use intermittent fasting, which
do you find that to be effective?
For some people, yes, and for some people, no.
That's another one of those things where it either works for you or it doesn't.
Exactly. There's no hard and fast rule, but I will say if you're interested in intermittent fasting or fasting, then there are some really great YouTube videos out there by healthcare professionals, doctors, explaining very clearly and simply what happens when you fast, what happens to your body over the course of 24 hours and 36 hours and 48 hours and 72 hours when you fast for those periods of time. And it's really actually very interesting and explained very clearly and simply.
Interesting. What about like ketosis and the keto diet? Like,
mm-hmm.
how do you feel about that?
So if it's done well and it's a balanced diet, then yes, I think that it can work for people. But again, some people will take a diet to the extreme and look at it a certain way, kind of the way that they want to look at it, and it'll turn into a very imbalanced diet, and they'll get very sick.
Ooh.
So any diet will work for almost anyone, but the point is that you want to be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or your own version of healthy. And if that's the case, then you still want to have a balanced diet. Mm-hmm. You still want to make sure that you're getting the nutrients that your body needs. So whatever that looks like, whatever diet you choose, you want to make sure that you're truly doing the research and getting what your body actually needs from it.
And then also listening to your body too,
mm-hmm.
and observing its responses, not just like how you're feeling, but like how your body is like actually reacting. Like, do you have good energy levels? Like
right.
after you've been doing this, whatever this diet is or
right.
whatever this meal plan is. And
mm-hmm.
if you don't, like, what are you missing?
Right.
Do you need more protein? Do you need more carbohydrates? Do you
mm-hmm.
need more fat? Some people actually need more fat in their diet.
Yep. And the one other thing I'll say about dieting is for people who are trying to lose weight, or actually any kind of diet that you go on for a certain goal,
mm-hmm.
if you plan on doing that, then that's great. There's nothing wrong with it. But realize that that diet that you're going on, in order to reach and maintain that goal, chances are you're going to have to stay on that diet for the rest of your life.
Right.
Because once you reach that goal, if you go off of that diet and just back to the way that you were eating before, the same thing's going to happen as what happened before. You're just going to go back to the weight or, the same problems that you had before, that you were trying to get rid of. So, the best way to accomplish your goals is to be on a diet that will help you meet those goals, but that you can maintain for a long period of time, the rest of your life.
And that's why I'm in this incremental method of adding and taking away things from my diet, because it helps build that into a sustainable pattern.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so what would be an ideal amount or frequency of exercise? So, like, as far as this question goes, I think we probably want to ask more explicitly, like, if you're just starting out.
So,
and diabetes is the concern.
Yeah. So, when you're just starting out, I always recommend, like, if you are going from not having any physical activity at all, to starting to exercise, start off small. Start with some form of physical activity a day that is realistic and achievable for you. Going back to those SMART goals, right? Whether it's 10 minutes of walking every day.
You think that's enough?
20 minutes. Any activity compared to no activity is enough.
All right.
If you feel like that's all that you can accomplish starting out, then do that. Do that 10 minutes of physical activity. If you think that 20 minutes of physical activity, whatever that looks like, is achievable for you, then go for that 20 minutes of physical activity. Okay. So starting out, that's a good, you're going to be the best person to decide what that looks like.
Okay? And that, again, needs to be based on how you feel while you're exercising.
Right.
So, there is, when you're exercising, there is a certain amount of exertion you want to accomplish, but there is a point where that becomes too much. So where are those ranges, do you think?
Yeah. Listen to your body. Again, I know I've said that a lot, but listen to your body. If you feel like you can't breathe, then stop what you're doing. You know what I mean? Okay. If it starts to hurt, stop what you're doing. Don't do things that cause you to not be able to breathe, that make your heart rate go way faster than it should be beating, or that cause you pain. Those are things that your body was not meant to do. Okay?
And you think anything within those limitations is generally acceptable?
For the most part,
go ahead and push yourself.
Yes. But again, go slow. So, for example, if you're lifting weights, start with a smaller weight. And I'll be honest with you, no one really needs, unless you're trying to go for a bodybuilding competition, no one really needs to lift super heavy weights to build muscle.
And what does that look like? What is a super heavy weight versus an acceptable weight?
Yeah, so curling 50 pounds. You don't need to curl 50 pounds. Exactly. To gain muscle. There's something called time under tension, which I know that you and I have talked about before, where if you take a 25 pound weight, or whatever weight feels comfortable for you, and you just go slow, then your muscle, it kind of tricks it into thinking that you're actually curling a heavier weight than what it actually is.
You're getting more work on that muscle.
Exactly. So time under tension means you're putting more tension under, or you're putting that muscle under tension for a longer period of time. Okay? And that helps actually build the muscle. Just the way that it would if you were lifting a heavier weight.
And I would say, just from my experience with doing time under tension, that I built weight strength very fast.
Yeah.
Much faster than I was doing before.
Yes.
And it was actually amazing. At first, it was like, wow, this is really hard, and I was really struggling with it. But now, like every week, I feel like I'm going up, like a lot more than I anticipate, and I'm like, am I sure? I should keep it a little lower. I don't know that I'm there yet, but my body's literally like, I want more. At this point.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for time under tension.
Yeah, and not only that, it's safer. It truly is.
You can monitor your movement.
Yeah, so you can not only monitor your movement, but you can also make sure that you have good form to prevent injury. Yeah, so those are definitely things that you want to keep in mind when you're starting to work out. So.
Great. So, do you think that one is better than the other, whether it's just going around the block and walking, or should I be buying like small dumbbells? Like, do you think one is any better than the other?
I think you have to, again, listen to your body and decide what is going to work best for you. I think a balanced workout is ideal for everybody. But it depends on your goals. If you want to build muscle, then you want to have weightlifting in your routine, right?
Walking is not going to help you build your biceps.
Walking is not going to help you build up your biceps. So it depends on your goals. Walking is going to help improve your cardiovascular health, but it's not going to help you meet your weight, your strength training goals, right? So it really depends on what your goals are. So, and there's again, going back to research, there are a lot of really helpful and reliable websites out there that will give you the information to help you meet your goals. So I definitely encourage people to do their own research, and if you're having a hard time, if you're having a hard time figuring out, then reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. So
I think that's a great thing to offer people. So hopefully they'll find you through this. One thing that I've come to realize through getting back into the gym is that the exercises that I find are more fun are probably more ideal because I enjoy doing them more rather than the ones that, of course, there's certain parts of the body that you want to make sure that you're working out. But I think it's been key for me to find a way to make it fun. That way it doesn't seem like this daunting task, that's going to be hard. And then also the act of lifting weights versus doing cardio exercise. Well, I guess they both actually do it, but I feel like lifting weights almost puts your body under more stress, like short term, and I think it actually helps your body manage stress hormones better because you're kind of stressing your body out intentionally in a controlled environment where you can technically stop every time, but you're kind of like forming this relationship with your stress where it's like, hey, we've got this under control. If we get stressed out, we're kind of okay still, right? And we can stop whatever we're doing at any time. Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage people to have a varied workout, having, and change your workouts too, doing a good balanced workout, just like your diet, you want to have a good balanced diet, you want to have a good balanced workout. You don't want to have just strength training or just cardio or just yoga in your workout routine, unless you are trying to meet a specific goal. Like if you want to be a yoga master, then maybe you want to have just yoga in your workout repertoire. So, but in general, for a very balanced musculature and physical fitness, it's to have a well-balanced, a really well-balanced physical fitness, or a physically fit body, then having a well-balanced workout routine is important. And changing up your routine too, so every month or month and a half or so, change your routine. So if you're doing, upper body a certain way for, this length of time, and you feel yourself starting to get bored with it, well, rather than just stopping and being like, oh, I'm bored with it, I don't want to do it anymore, change the routine, find different routines that keep it interesting.
You're kind of doing the same thing, but you're doing something different. You're working the same muscles, but doing something different. That's what I meant.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's really effective. I've experienced that because I was doing the weightlifting my own way, and then I added your time under tension thing, and then my other friend is doing this pyramid thing where you do like 10 reps, 9 reps, 8 reps, all the way through until you get down to 1 rep, and it's been fun. It's made it more interesting, and it kind of adds like a new dimension to the workout. And every time I change it up, it feels like a whole new thing.
Yeah,
I'm not bored with it, and I'm also seeing results, which is also encouraging too. So. All right, so our last question: can I have one cookie to satisfy my sweet tooth?
Can you have just one? That is
a big question.
That's a big question.
Can any of us just have one?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on your self-control. Like, I know myself well enough to know that if, depending on what kind of cookie it is, it's really hard for me to have just one.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I want at least 5.
Sure,
but,
as we all do.
Right. But
one's not bad, neither is 2.
Right. So what I would say is if you really want to have just one cookie, then pull the box of cookies out, pull one cookie out, and put the box away. So out of sight, out of mind, right? Once you have that one cookie, have some water. If after you have that one cookie and you have some water and you really feel like you need another cookie, then pull the box out, take one cookie out, put the box away, have that second cookie.
Rather than having that just
and a glass of water
available too.
Right.
I do like adding the glass of water to it too. I think that's a nice touch.
Yeah. And because, or, if you need a glass of milk with a cookie, then go for the glass of milk, whatever. But it just, the biggest thing or point that I'm trying to make with this is, if your goal is to only have one cookie, then set yourself up for success with that one goal. I know it's a silly, small goal, but if that's what your goal is, then set yourself up for it, And setting yourself up for it means you're setting the expectation ahead of time. When you take that box out of the cupboard, you take that one cookie out of the box, and then you put the box away, you're setting yourself up for the expectation that you're only going to have that one cookie. Right. So that is setting yourself up for success with that one small goal.
Right. I love that. I love because it has like a way to reinforce your actual intention too. Like instead of just leaving the box of cookies out open on the counter while you have that one and you're looking into that open box and it's very inviting to reach in there again, right? And this very intentional process of saying, nope, it's just going to be this one. I'm going to put the box back and I'm not going to think about it for the rest of the night.
Yep.
And I think the first time you do that, it might be challenging, and you might feel that urge to like, you take one more. Nobody's gonna know, but like you will, your waist will, right? But I think over time that practice will become more comfortable.
Absolutely.
See, I'm more like the type of person you were talking about earlier, where like I kind of go really hardcore when I get serious about my health. Like I won't let myself put that stuff in my house.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I won't, like, that's not to say that I won't go get a donut somewhere or go buy a box of cookies and eat them in my car.
Right.
But the thing is that they're not in my house, so I can't just walk and grab them out of the cupboard, and I will intentionally replace those kinds of things with fruits or nuts or dehydrated fruits and berries and things like that, so that when I'm feeling that urge for a sweet tooth, that's the only option I have. And yes, sometimes I'm disappointed, but it does remind me of like, wait, I'm doing this for my health and I am trying to improve my health, and that's the whole goal of this right now. And that keeps me I'm a little sad over the fact that I can't have that cookie, but like we're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and you're setting the intention, like you said, and that's gonna it's just gonna set you up for success. So
absolutely.
So that's a really great example of a way to set intention is by not like when you go grocery shopping, not buying the stuff, and shop from a grocery list. Make it another intention to only shop from a grocery list. So say, okay, when I go to the grocery list, I'm not going to go down the aisle that I know the cookies are down. I'm only going to go down the aisles that have the stuff that are on my list, right? So you're setting yourself again up for that success. Those small successes and that intention is there. So any step that you can take to push that intention forward is just going to push you more towards success and towards reaching your goals. So
excellent. Excellent. So I think that this was really great. I think there's a lot of fantastic information here. Chris has been wonderful at being able to supply a lot of experience and information here. So if you have anybody in your life or yourself you would like to talk to him about managing your diet, your exercise, your wellness, your type 2 diabetes or whatever, even your mental and emotional health, he's equipped for doing that stuff too. Go ahead and reach out to him. Look for IEB Wellness on the interwebs and also through social media, and hit him up and see what you can do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. I appreciate it. And so www.iebhealth-wellness is the website for anybody that's interested. Please feel free to reach out. And thanks again for having me today. It was great.
Yeah, anytime. I plan to do this a few more times. So.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.